Good morning and welcome to the first Audit Committee meeting of 2023. Happy New Year to all. I hope that this new year has ushered in joy and positivity for you as you move forward. Now we're going to open the meeting, and I believe we're recording.
We are.
Perfect, thank you. And I'd like to request roll call from our committee coordinator, Mr. Ewert.
Sure. Broughton.
Here.
Chen.
Here.
Shelby.
Present.
Tony. We have a quorum.
Excellent. Now it's time to call for public comment. As you know, State Bar staff will, this probably works better with glasses, will attempt to call members of the public in the order that they appear in the attendee pool. For those who are participating by Zoom video, you should have a function where you have the opportunity to virtually raise your hand. And it, of course, is the icon that appears at the bottom of your screen. If you wish to address the committee, simply click that icon and State Bar staff will call on you. For those who are participating by telephone, you may virtually raise your hand by pressing *9. That is the *9 key, and that will alert staff to your desire to make a comment, and they will be able to open up your microphone. Due to time restrictions, we cannot allow more than 3 minutes for each speaker. And please note that staff will have an on-screen countdown timer visible to participants during the duration of public comment. And also, once you hit 30 seconds remaining, you will be verbally alerted and the timer will flash the last 10 seconds. And so at this juncture, are there any members of the public? I'm going to turn that to Mr. Ewert. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak?
Yes, Mr. Hill. And
good morning, Mr. Hill. You have.
Can someone in the room unmute Mr. Hill? Thank you. I don't have. Mr. Hill, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. It's interesting. You asked would I like to speak. I really would not like to speak at these. I'd like to not have cause to speak. That being said, good morning to all. Happy New Year to those who I've not addressed previously this year. Then Shelby, you and I have exchanged words, I think, at least. At any rate, 2 comments. One, again, sort of is apropos and unthought of, but basically I have an idea that perhaps a more appropriate and accountable way to invoke the public's right to comment might be to simply say that generally we allow 3 minutes, and at your discretion you can allow more time if the matter requires it. In that way, you've used the term your discretion. You've clearly stated that you can opt to simply hold the person at 3 minutes. And then you can actually use what never gets used, perhaps even a contempt proceeding, though that would be, again, you guys using a test saying, hey, in our discretion, we decided that 3 minutes is more than enough for this person, right? So you're completely accountable in that you have not artificially limited a time, and you've not actually artificially inserted necessarily an interruption or a 30-second warning, which I'm glad I have not had this morning. I really do appreciate that. I noticed that effort. So from the perspective of audit, one of the issues that I really do have is this notion that there is no third-party policy review, that the review is completely internal. The federal government has established an Office of Policy of Administration. California has an office of I think it's only 23 attorneys, right? So I can see why maybe it would not seem logical to have your policies reviewed by 23 attorneys, right? But the reality is that this notion of checks and balances.
30 seconds left.
oh, and I had been so, wow, how do you revoke an apology or thanks for courtesy? At any rate, it is something to consider, third-party review of policies and more open public access to policies to avoid issues. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Hill, for your comments. We are now going to move on to the chair's report. My report is quite abbreviated, and looking forward to the conversation and the discussion that we are going to have today. You see the agenda as it's laid out in front of you. We are halfway through the year, and this is when we get the opportunity as audit to really engage in compliance. And so I'm looking forward for those conversations. At our last meeting, we had a very robust discussion, and we will be addressing that in the first agenda item. Next, I'd like to move to minutes. Are there any members that have changes to the minutes? If not, may I get a motion and a second?
Move to approve the minutes.
Thank you. It was moved by Mr. Tony and seconded by Mr. Broughton. And Mr. Ewert, can you call the roll, please?
Broughton,
Yes.
Chen,
I will abstain because I did not attend that meeting.
okay, Shelby,
Yes.
Tony.
Aye.
The motion passes
Thank you.
with 3 votes to affirm.
Thank you. The next agenda item is business. Our first item is item A, review and discussion of draft biennial report to the legislature on diversity, equity, and inclusion in the legal profession. And I believe that Elizabeth Hom, our program director from the Office of Access and Inclusion, is going to be kicking off this agenda item. Good morning, Elizabeth.
Good morning, Chair Shelby and members of the Audit Committee. My name is Elizabeth Hom, and I'm a Program Director with the Office of Access and Inclusion, here to present on item 3A, review and discussion of the draft biennial report to the Legislature on diversity, equity, and inclusion in the profession. Since 2019, the State Bar has been required by Business and Professions Code Section 6001.3 to submit a biennial report to the Legislature to demonstrate our ongoing commitment to and support of effective policies and activities to enhance access, fairness, and diversity in the profession and the elimination of bias in the practice of law. Our next report is due on March 15th, 2023. The draft report included in your meeting materials shares the progress made on various DEI initiatives in the past 2 years and plans for 2023 and 2024, which includes our ongoing activities and initiatives, as well as activities and initiatives identified to advance the goals of our 2022 to 2027 strategic plan and the operational plan. The draft, as you've seen, begins with an introduction and demographic overview, and then is organized into the following sections. The first is statewide leadership, then creating a culture of inclusivity. Third is pipeline to the profession, and last, retention and advancement in the profession. As stated in our item, this is a very draft report, right? This draft is very much in progress. And so there are still sections and subsections that need to be developed. So at this time, I'd like to invite your questions and feedback.
Mr. Tony.
Thank you, Chair Shelby. I have several comments and thoughts. First of all, I really appreciate that the board is having a chance to see this in draft form. That wasn't the case 2 years ago, and I just want to acknowledge that the staff for responding to feedback of several board members. So I think this is a huge step forward. So thank you very much, Elizabeth and the rest of the staff that worked on this. Some of my comments have to do with how the data is presented and making some suggestions for consistency. So, figure 1, I appreciate the value of charts that show progress and change over time. so that we're not just looking at a snapshot. Actually, both are useful, but I understand the value. And so, chart 1 starts at 1970. Now, chart 2, figure 2 starts at 1990, okay? And so I think there's some value to standardizing, the time frames that are being presented, because it's just easier conceptually to follow. And I have less concern about exactly when. I think 70 may be a little long, quite frankly. I like the 90. That's one. The other thing I'd be interested in is a little dot, 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 dot line that separates the bar from its previous incarnation as both a regulatory and trade association, if you will, and the bifurcation after 2017, maybe 2018, because that's the first, full year. Because that would also be nice to, then in the same chart, we can see a little progress before, progress after. So those are two thoughts. My other thought is I'm very interested in figure 7, and this is the people with disabilities. I'd be interested in seeing a little bit about the time chart on that. I see the 6% of California attorneys, and based upon the information presented in the previous figures, I'm left to wonder, is that something that has improved over the years? Is it static? I just have no way of telling. So those are just some thoughts and recommendations I have for your consideration. I like charts a great deal. I like data a great deal. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Trustee Tony, for that feedback. Really appreciate your attention to detail in your review of the report. So we will I'll take that back to my colleagues. We're also working on the report, and we'll see what we can do to provide more details and standardize the timeframes presented.
Thank you very much. I do appreciate it.
Trustee Chen.
So I, like Trustee Tony, also really love charts and graphs, and I really appreciate the work and attention that went into these. I think for future iterations, it would be really helpful to try to align these, the topics that are covered with the topics that are covered in the narrative discussion. So for example, we have a lot of discussion of the work that we are doing with respect to the law school pipeline into the profession, and I think it would be really interesting to see a demographic breakdown for students at law schools and applicants for the bar exam, or test takers, and then test passers, and sort of all the things that we're talking about in the narrative section about things we're trying to do to impact it through the positive mindsets intervention, or whatever it is we call it now. And I think aligning the charts and graphs with that discussion would also make it more compelling.
Great, thank you, Trustee Chen.
Excellent feedback. Any other comments from the trustees? Excellent. This is not an action item, and so again, want to thank Elizabeth and the team in terms of putting this together. And I do have a question as it relates to once the draft is completed and once you get to the final report, will we be seeing this at the larger board meeting in terms of a report to the board? I know last year it was a consent item, and so I'm hoping that there will be some time in the board meeting for others to receive this report. I guess that's a comment and a question at the same time.
Yes, we'll make sure to put this on for discussion at the full board.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Moving forward, our next agenda item, discussion of organizational audit focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. The next agenda is to discuss the organization audit with the focus on DEI, and it's being presented by our finance manager and our committee coordinator, Justin Eward, and we're going to welcome here Teresa Bruce, the principal HR analyst within the Office of Recruitment and Retention. Welcome to the Audit Committee meeting today.
Thank you, Melanie. This is a follow-up from our conversation at our November meeting. We had a robust discussion on what the scope of that audit, the organizational audit focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We talked about the procurement disparity study, we talked about the investment policy revisions, and then we talked about two other elements that we've brought back for further discussion at this meeting. One of those elements is blind recruiting, and the other element is the diversity, equity, and inclusion leadership seal. And so my colleague, Teresa Bruce, is going to give a brief presentation on blind recruiting, because at that time, we had a discussion, but we didn't necessarily have all the background information on blind recruiting. And so Teresa will kind of provide an overview of what blind recruiting is, and I will turn it over to her now.
Teresa, make sure that your mic is on and you're talking right into it. Thanks.
Thanks, Leah. I'm here to present additional information on blind recruitment. Are you going to show the slides, Joe? Okay.
Justin, are you going to share the slides or?
Sure. Apologize.
Okay, perfect. If you can go to the next slide, Justin. Okay, so today we'll be covering what blind recruitment is, studies that support the blind recruitment process. We'll also provide examples of biases that can occur during the recruitment process, and also provide some things to consider as the committee discusses whether or not the State Bar will move forward with blind recruitment. Next slide. Okay, so blind recruitment is a process used during the recruitment process to help reduce bias by removing personal information from candidate resumes and applications. And these are just some of the examples of information that would be redacted. So name, schools, affinity memberships, addresses, dates of education or work experience. We've also seen examples where some organizations remove the name of former employers. So it all depends on the different things that we would consider removing from the resume or the application. Next slide. And then we wanted to provide some studies and some data on the different studies that have taken place that support blind recruitment. So the NAME study, which was originally mentioned in last month's meeting, was originally conducted in 2003, and it was again conducted last year in 2022. So in this study, similar resumes were sent out containing the same skills, same information. The only differences were names. And the results showed that in 2003, that white-sounding names were 50% more likely to be contacted for an interview. When the study was conducted again in 2022, again, identical applications, black-sounding names were called back 10% less for interviews. We have also provided links as to the studies within the presentation. There was also the orchestra study, which was published in 2000. What they did was they started conducting auditions behind a curtain so that you couldn't see the gender. What they found was there wasn't a big change as to who was getting moved on to the next audition. And they then asked the musicians to remove their shoes, because people then could tell whether somebody was wearing heels or somebody was not. And when they did that, the results were that 50% of women made it past the first audition. And then the last study we wanted to share was the law memo study. This was conducted in 2014 by Nextians. Again, same memo was shared with the partners. The partners were then told that one memo was written by a Black man and one memo was written by a white man, and then these were the results. The reviewers scored the same memo 30% higher when the author was a white man, and they found 40% more errors in the legal memo. Actually, that should be, oh yeah, 40% of the errors were found with a white man's work versus 83% of the errors with the Black man's work. Next slide, Justin. We also wanted to share some examples of biases that can occur when reviewing resumes. Although these can occur at various times, we wanted to point out specifically of how it can occur during a resume review. So the halo effect, this is the tendency for us to assign positive qualities through positive association with something else. So, you know, if they worked at Google, they might be, you know, that means they're a strong candidate. The affinity bias is the tendency for us to gravitate toward or favor others who appear similar to us. You know, so I completed that certification too. They must be a hard worker because I know how hard that was to complete. The third is a stereotype bias, a standardized mental picture held in common by members of a group. So in this case, you know, oh, they graduated 20 years ago. I don't know how familiar they would be with the latest trends in the industry. And then we also wanted to include groupthink, a tendency that encourages us to desire harmony or conformity within our group. So in this case, the example as well, my manager, director, whoever, thinks that they're the stronger candidate, so I'm just gonna go along with that. Justin, next slide. And then we just wanted to end with just a list of considerations for you all to think about. So the effectiveness of blind recruitment is still not clear. Cities do need to go further to track who gets hired. Question about, do we want to celebrate or mask diversity during our recruitment process? And we really want to emphasize that blind recruitment is just one component in our goal, in the State Bar's goal of having a diverse and inclusive workforce. It's recommended that we review the entire employee life cycle, including the structure that we have in place, processes, as well as people development. So during recruitment, this can include things like a diverse interview panel, making sure we have a diverse interview panel, additional training for hiring managers, incorporating blind assessments. And then after recruitment, it's ensuring that we have systems and resources in place that retain and promote employees in an equitable way. And that is it. Next slide, Justin. And we wanted to just leave it open if you had any questions.
Thank you, Teresa. I'd like to open up the conversation to my colleagues on the board. Any questions or comments? I have comments, but I'm going to hold off on mine until others have the opportunity to speak. Mr. Tony.
You know me, I'm not shy on this stuff. I'm going to first state, to be very clear, that I am a very strong opponent of blind recruitment for many reasons. I will admit I did not read each one of these studies, so I don't know all the details. I just didn't have the time. So I think we have to be really clear about what the outcome that we're looking for. And the outcome that we're looking for is a recruitment and hiring process that is free of bias. That is the outcome. That is what the blind recruitment purports to do. And I guess my position is that there are better strategies to achieve that goal. And the basic problem with blind recruitment is that you don't deal with the bias that the hiring teams have. It's trying to artificially eliminate biases by eliminating the criteria by which people will discriminate against other people. What we need to do is apply our principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion in such a way that we promote those principles, that we continue to work with staff with the responsibility of recruitment and hiring, and insist and provide them the resources they need to understand their own biases, to overcome them, to learn things like, instead of removing any information about the schools they went to help them understand that simply because somebody didn't go to an Ivy League school does not mean they're not qualified and will not be successful doing a job. We need people to understand and to embrace the fact that there are many pathways to success in life and to success as an employee at the state bar. And simply eliminating, I'm just using that as one example, simply eliminating the school that they went to doesn't do it, because when that person is hired, by the time they're hired, that's going to be clear. By the time someone is hired, their race, their gender, their background is going to be clear. And then we have the issue of retention. It's not just about hiring, it's about retention. And if the management staff does not have, and you need to hide everything in order for them not to exercise bias in the hiring process, then that bias is going to come out in the management, supervisory, support. And then we're going to have retention issues. So I think this is absolutely the wrong strategy. I very strongly oppose it. I will tell you this, that the logical extension of blind recruitment is to turn over hiring to this chat GPT that we're all reading about. Why don't we let the because, we might as well let that do our hiring decisions for us, okay? Because that's the logical extension of blind recruitment. That's enough for now.
Thank you, Mr. Tony.
So I also have a preference for not doing blind recruiting for many of the reasons that Trustee Tony stated. I feel like and primarily because I think bias needs to be addressed head on and identified and resolved. And there are other ways to do it that are not just blinding those things that these studies tried to blind. And they include things like implicit bias training, ensuring a diverse recruiting panel, and also teaching people about bias interrupters. The point of having a diverse panel has been, in my experience, doing a lot of attorney evaluations in both hiring and promotion, is if you have people of color and a diverse panel, they can often call out instances of bias, and other people, regardless of whether they're a person of color or not, who have received implicit bias training, can also call out instances of bias, and a conversation can be had about that. And there have been very effective trainings about bias interrupters and ways in which you can call out bias in ways that are collegial and productive, and how to have a conversation about those. So I would be in favor of doing that rather than blind recruiting.
Thank you, Trustee Chen. Mr. Broughton?
Yes, I agree with both the previous trustees on this. I'm not really a fan of it either. And I'm just wondering, what, if anything, do we learn from these studies? I was a little unclear about what result we got from it.
I mean, to me, it's that bias really exists. I mean, to me, it's that bias exists.
Well,
right?
we know
I mean,
that,
like,
but
I think it just confirms how strong of an effect it can have. I mean, that to me has always been the takeaway from those studies, and says to us we need to do things to make sure that we're not letting them letting bias influence our decision-making. I think that's all. I don't think it tells us that we have to have blind recruitment.
Any other comments? I am not in support of blind recruiting, and I know we have another issue that we're talking about in terms of the DEI leadership seal, but we jumped right into blind recruiting, so I want us to talk about it, and for the reasons that my colleagues have shared. But as I was reading the item and looking at the studies, I thought about the implicit bias training that transpires here at the State Bar. And so if people are going through implicit bias training on a regular basis, and I believe that that is the case, then there is no need for blind recruiting. And I think in terms of just kind of celebrating diversity and equity and inclusion, and I would even throw belonging in there, which is, another aspect of this work that people are really focusing on. I think it's just important. I think it's absolutely important. I think it's great when you see a name come across a resume that may be from somewhere in the diaspora. And I think if you have the right mix of people who are engaged in the interview panel, oftentimes you can pull out the best of one another and celebrate the rich diversity that is so important to us. So I think we are all in agreement that blind recruitment is not an area of interest for the members of this body. And so I'm not quite sure if we need to continue to have a further discussion at this juncture.
I don't think we do. I mean, I would just say normally this type of sort of operational decision would not necessarily come to a board or a board committee. But because of the focus of this audit committee on DEI, we have brought it forward. And frankly, there are, I think, although members of this committee don't see it, legitimate and valid points on actually both sides. I would just say briefly that I think the mitigation kind of efforts that you all speak to, implicit bias training, bias interrupters, etc. I think they are absolutely valid, and in principle, they should be effective. But if we look at many law firms, we look at many governmental employers, including ourselves, we look to see who is in the highest levels of leadership in these organizations. They are not a picture of true representation of diversity. So these training, bias interruption, all of that, it only takes us so far. And I think we need to be honest about that. That being said, certainly hear the views of the committee on this. I think as a staff team, we're certainly very open, and I think it's safe to say we will put this on the back burner, not move forward with it at this time. And thank you and appreciate the feedback.
Thank you, and thank you for bringing the item forward. I do know that we have a resolution, and it is focused on the DEI leadership seal. And Justin, I don't know if you wanted to just spend some time from a high-level overview in terms of the documents as it relates to the seal.
Yes, I'd be glad to. The items for the DEI seal, the leadership seal, there are 10 items. Of which 2 need to be done. The first 2 are required of everything. And then there are different levels to achieve different status, whether it be gold level, silver level, or bronze level. And so the agenda item put forth discussed each of these items and the progress that the bar has done on each of these items. And I don't know if I need to kind of go over that individually if you'd like me to, I can go over the status of each of those items one by one, or what we were looking for today more generally is for the committee to kind of make a resolution directing staff to achieve the highest status, the gold level status, and continue to pursue that status level.
I don't know if you, my thought and idea, and please others chime in. As I was reviewing this item, I was trying to get clarity around the foundational pieces. And I know that you and I have had this conversation in our ongoing check-ins. For me, so I do think sharing kind of high level, the different items just to remind us and bring it top of mind would be great. I don't think we have to spend a significant amount of time on that. But the other piece that I also wanted to get clarity around was what are the foundational items, and then what gets you, and I understand the numbers that get you to bronze, to silver, and to gold from a 5, I think it's 5, 7, or something like that. But I think it's, as I was thinking about the seal, and I know in past conversations, we talked about the lead certification that people pursue. And thinking of the seal, I personally think it's important that the foundational items be substantive and it be more than just 2 items. And when you are looking to reach for a bronze, or you're looking to reach for a silver, or you're looking to reach for a gold, that's truly stretching as it relates to attaining those different pieces. And so that was kind of the 2 cents that I wanted to share, and wanted to get clarity around what the foundational items were, and then see if there was an opportunity. And maybe that's getting into the weeds too much, but definitely that's what came top of mind for me in my review. Any other thoughts by trustees as Justin prepares to walk us through this? Great, thank you.
Okay. The first 2 items are kind of foundational that every organization that wants to achieve the leadership seal will need to complete. The first one is collect and maintain data on demographics of attorneys, non-attorney legal staff, management, and the board where applicable. And this is something that the State Bar has already started to implement. We've enabled employees to self-identify race, ethnicity, and gender. So we've started to do that. And then we're in progress about adding demographic information around these areas to current HR reports. So we're working on that. And then the second one is create a strategic DEI plan for the organization with specific objectives, metrics, and benchmarks over time. And so this is somewhere where we are in progress. There are certain parts of the plan that has been developed, but the overall goal is to have this plan developed in the first quarter of 2023. So by April of this year, we hope to have that plan fully developed. Now, after those 2 foundational ones, the other 8 are the different tiers. And so I can go over those one by one and the status of where the bar is. It says for the third one,
Justin,
at least.
I want to interrupt you. I also
Sure.
asked Elizabeth to come back in because I think she knows the components better than any of us, myself included.
Sure.
But it is not my understanding that the 2 are foundational in the sense that once you achieve those 2, you achieve some level of seal status, if that's the concern. Those 2, everybody pursuing any type of seal must achieve. But in order to even get the lowest level seal, you have to complete 5. So I just want to make sure that was clear.
No, that was very clear. My
Okay.
question was around the ones that were identified. Like, example, I think a DEI statement, I think that's one of the basic foundational things, right? I don't think you can move an organizational plan forward without having a DEI statement. So I think that's one of the foundational items that someone should have in terms of pursuing the seal, and so that was kind of my thought as it related to some of these different pieces that were here. And if I didn't articulate that the right way, I certainly want to take responsibility for that. Welcome back, Elizabeth.
If I may just provide a little bit more information. A lot of the feedback that we received in conducting various focus groups and interviews for development of the leadership seal is that because there are a lot of DEI programs, surveys, et cetera, that a lot of law firms participate in already, stakeholders hoped that the State Bar's DEI leadership seal would not kind of reinvent the wheel and not be too onerous for employers to participate in, because stakeholders did feel that a State Bar seal would have some value in this space. And so in taking in that feedback, staff really wanted to make the barrier to entry not so high that people would be discouraged from participating and applying. And the other point I wanted to highlight is that these 10 action items are kind of what we're considering like a baseline. And as the SEAL program progresses and evolves, we're hoping to revisit the action items to make them more challenging in kind of a spirit of continuous improvement for all employers. So, speaking directly about the diversity statement, we got a lot of feedback, surprisingly, that a lot of employers don't even have that. And so that's one of the reasons that it wasn't necessarily a requirement, but in the future it may be as this program evolves.
I certainly appreciate that explanation. I guess for me, and when I think about the DEI work that I've been involved in the last 25 years, it's difficult to have a plan if you don't have a statement. That's like not having a mission plan. And so that's why I felt like that was a foundational. You need to understand what motivates, we have our 4 areas here at the State Bar as it relates to the 4 areas of our focus inside of our strategic plan. But we couldn't have a strategic plan if we didn't have a mission.
Right.
And so I felt the statement was one of those foundational. I wanted to recommend that the statement is a foundational, in my opinion, and in the work that I've done, it's a foundational piece that guides what comes later as it relates to a plan per se. So I don't know if any others have feedback on that, but I wanted to definitely share that. Mr. Tony.
Thank you. I like the concept of the leadership seal. And, in my mind, I'm thinking, what would a law firm, an organization that, has significant, we don't have to work out all the details now, but what are they going to look like? Okay. When, the ones that get the seals. And I imagine that, the firms and organizations that get the seal would have clear evidence of reasonable amounts of diversity to start out with. Gender, race, other forms of diversity that is documented. And, I know this is still in process. When I look at this and I look at all the criteria, I'm wondering what in here would prevent and exclude a firm for which all of the partners were white male attorneys, but they did they had the statements, they did the demographics, they had plans, and they did the comparisons. They conducted stay and exit interviews. They got together and talked about it annually. They had trainings on recognizing the implicit. And I'm asking this because, all these things, because I want to make sure that there are, what's missing from this is what I'm saying, is some actual metrics that say there is no way you're going to get it if you don't meet these minimum metrics for your workforce, for your management, and I just don't see this here right now. I know it's under development, but I just wanted to make sure if there's something in here that I'm not seeing or not understanding, you can help me. I just saw this a few days ago, so yeah. So anyway, I'm going to stop there for a moment. I have a second point, but let me stop there and see if you have anything that can enlighten me on this.
I don't think there's not like a safeguard in place necessarily for somebody to participate in this and, in a performative manner. We are in many ways relying on employers to be truthful and honest when they are applying for this seal. We are asking for documentation of some of their implementation steps so that we can, check to see if it is really making an impact at their organizations. But beyond that, that is difficult for us to gauge. I think, Trustee Tony, as you mentioned, this is kind of a work in progress. And so we do have in our work plan for this program to talk with our colleagues in the Office of Research and Institutional Accountability, talk about, metrics that would be appropriate, that we could gather either, that we already have as a state bar, or that we can gather from applicants to further look at the qualifications for the program.
But I would just add specifically to your point, Trustee Tony, that we have had conversations about whether or not the seal is measuring sort of inputs, which is what it's doing, I think, as opposed to outputs, which is what you're talking about, or outcomes. And right now it is inputs, it's process. Did you do it? Not what was the result. And I know specifically that some of the expert consultants that we have worked with to develop this seal, they've called the program, they have called that out, but we've also talked about that being part of the evolution of the seal program, that it would be very difficult to come out the gate with, you must have a management team at your firm that reflects the diversity of California. Therefore, your management team must be 36% Latino, for example. That would be a difficult place for us to start. But do we in fact need to get there? I think yes. We in our own organization as a state bar can be and will be much more aggressive, I think, and certainly in setting some level of targets for outcomes. But I just want to acknowledge that I think it is an issue. It's something we have discussed, and I see it as part of the evolution of the SEAL program as we move forward, and as we gain some credibility and buy-in from legal employers.
I appreciate your clarification there. What I would like to see in, you have two thresholds right now. I'm just calling them threshold qualifications. And I think for each, the bronze, silver, and gold, there should be just very minimal standards of outcome. And you don't get gold. What gold should say is not that you collect a lot of data and do a lot of training. A gold certification should say you're doing pretty decent in actually walking the talk. And that I think would give so much more meaning to this. And you know what's interesting? It's always easier to be flexible. When you have standards, it's always easier going in the future to loosen the standards, to adjust them downwards. It is much more difficult to ratchet them up. You have a firm that got a silver and you ratchet up the requirements and they're not getting silver anymore. I'm just saying. This is lawyers. They like to complain about stuff like that. I swear to God, I work with them every day. Okay? Well, So I just want us to be thoughtful. I'm going to move to my second point because I think my point is made. As part of this, I would like to see some financial modeling. The financial modeling I want to see is, what is the estimated staff time to do this program? And based upon that estimated staff time, what are the fees associated with applying and being awarded these certifications? I think we're in a position, and I do serve on the Finance Committee, so we're very cognizant of the importance of new programs started by the bar, of the importance of them being self-sustaining financially. So I'd like to see some financial modeling that shows this is how much it costs, this is the startup, and something that says these are the thresholds we need to reach in order for it to be self-sustainable. If only 12 firms are interested, it's probably not self-sustainable. Maybe 200 have to be interested for it to be, I don't know what the numbers are, but that's something we haven't seen yet, and I think is extremely important for the development and for when it's time for the board to give its full blessing to this. I still see this in its development stage, but before it, goes prime time, I think we need to know this, and the board needs to make a financial sustainability assessment, and we need data and information to help us do that.
Okay, I think it's important for me to clarify, though, this initiative has launched. It launched January 9th, I believe, as the initial first phase. I think we've been very clear all along that there will be changes. So I think certainly the feedback we're getting today will inform after this first application cycle, the changes that will be made. We've also indicated that there would be a fee assessed and the fee needs to be developed. So I think there's plenty of time to do what it is that you're recommending. I think it's entirely appropriate and accurate that it needs to be self-funded. After we have one application cycle under our belts, we will be able to figure out what those costs should be, reasonable costs. So I do want to make sure that is clear. So I don't think at this juncture we can make changes to the elements of the SEAL program itself. We can decide what level the state bar itself as an employer is going to seek. And then for the next cycle, which I imagine would be a year from now, we can look at making substantive changes, including adding outcome metrics and other sort of changes, including more items in the foundational aspect so that they are not optional. All of those changes that those could occur, I think, as soon as 1 year from now.
Can I also respond to the idea that, you can't change the criteria as you go along? There's a really good model for organizations already doing that in this space with respect to law firms. So there's something called Mansfield certification that law firms can get certified for Mansfield. There are certain criteria. When it was first rolled out, it was just Mansfield certification. They increased the things you had to do in order to be Mansfield certified the following year. So then it was Mansfield certification plus. Then it's Mansfield 2.0. Then it's been Mansfield 3.0. We are now on Mansfield 6.0. And so Mansfield 6.0 has a ton of things you have to do if you compare it to where they first started out. And so they really did just dip their toe in the water to get people started on like, okay, well, we're going to have to do some things. And it's been a slow evolution, but really significant if you look at where they started versus where they are today. And I will say, as a law firm leader, faced with those Mansfield requirements, they have required us to stretch in some ways and to do things differently. So I do think there is a model and an example for having increased requirements over time.
Any other thoughts? I guess my question is, if this was rolled out on January 9th, and I know we've had substantive conversation in the board about this, I'm unaware of the significance of taking up the resolution if it's already in play. And so if someone can clarify that for me, that would be helpful.
It's we're deciding on having the state bar seek gold level, right? So that we set an example. But it's not that what's already in play is that this program has been rolled out to law firms generally, or to organizations generally.
Okay, I understand that, but I thought at a past board meeting, we already had a conversation that the state bar would seek a gold status. So I was unaware of why we needed to take that action today. So that was my question.
Melanie,
I think
at the last meeting, because our conversation was so substantive, we kind of ended without taking official action. So that's why we brought it back today, was to kind of discuss it, because the conversation was mostly on blind recruiting, and we didn't have a full discussion on the SEAL. And so that's why it's being brought back today.
Thank you for that. Mr. Broughton, were you going to say something?
I'm just wondering, I mean, it's only been 10 days or so since we rolled it out. What type of response, if any, have we received to it?
We've received very positive responses. Actually, we were able to preview the leadership seal at our diversity summit in October. And from that time, we received, about maybe 10 or so employers interested. Since the launch, we've received much more interest, people asking additional questions, seeing what they need to do to apply. We've received one application already. So I think there is a lot of interest and support for the program.
Mr. Tony?
My only suggestion and comment is that you consider including at least a couple of people on the review committee for the state bar application who are not employees of the state bar, just as a, so that it's not viewed as strictly internal. I mean, the state bar applies, they made the criteria, they review it, and they awarded themselves a gold star, I just think it's prudent to kind of, come up with a system. And, I'm just giving one suggestion. There are other ways to do it, but I want to encourage the state bar staff to think about a way to just be thoughtful about that consideration.
Any other comments? Well, it appears procedurally that we need to take up this resolution. And so, Justin, if you could read the resolution that is in front of us.
Sure. Resolved that, okay.
Resolved that the Audit Committee directs staff to pursue the Gold Tier DEI Leadership Seal to set an example for other legal organizations and to affirm the State Bar's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Can I get a motion and a second, please?
I'll second.
Okay, Mr. Broughton moved the item and Ms. Chen seconded. And can you call the roll, please?
Broughton,
Yes.
Chen,
Yes.
Shelby,
Aye.
Tony.
Aye.
That's 4-0 against. The motion passes.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Teresa, and thank you, Elizabeth, for joining us for this agenda item. We will now move to, we will now move to business item C, Office of Public Trust Liaison Status Update. It is our final agenda item, and we're going to invite our new public trust liaison, Enrique Zuniga, to join us. I want to say it is a pleasure to have you here. I had the opportunity with Mr. Mazur to be a part of the interview process, and I think it would be great for the Audit Committee if you could just share some highlights as it relates to your engagement here at the State Bar as you then take us through. I believe you are going to be doing a presentation today as it relates to your office. So welcome to the Audit Committee.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Enrique. I'm the first ever public trustee.
And I'm just going to ask you to turn on your microphone and speak directly into the mic. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Enrique Zuniga, and I'm the first ever public trust liaison for the State Bar of California. I want to start off by saying that I am honored to be in this position, and I am eager to be a resource for the public. As you may recall, previous audits identified a need for this type of position, and I like to remind myself that this is a position that was born out of necessity. So I want to share a little bit about myself. I have a decade of experience with the State Bar. I've had the privilege to speak to the public during all steps of the attorney complaint process. And I always say that speaking with the public set the foundation for my career here at the State Bar. I would like to move to slide 2, please. So that's the new Public Trust Liaison logo. And here's slide 2. So what is the Public Trust Liaison? The first thing that I will say is that this is a question that I've even had to answer to my own mother. So the first thing is that the Public Trust Liaison responds to questions and concerns brought by members of the public. I help to ensure that proper procedures were followed in the Office of the Chief Trial Counsel as it regards to the attorney complaint process and to admissions. There's also a proactive approach to educating the public as to how the discipline process works. And I can make recommendations based on findings for improvements to the attorney discipline process and the admissions process. One of the most important aspects of this position is that it's independent and impartial from OCTC and admissions to allow an objective evaluation of the complaints and the concerns from the public, and that also allows for an objective annual report for the State Bar leadership at the end of the year. So one of the best ways that I think to define the position is to be really clear on what the public liaison can and cannot do. So first thing, I'm going to start with what the public trust liaison can do. First, I answer any questions that are attorney related, including complaint process, the complaint review unit, the client security fund, mandatory fee arbitration, also admission related issues, deadlines, processes, timelines, how long things should take, the moral character and fitness process. We also provide updates for people that have already filed complaints. And I'm also a resource for people that have pending complaints that like to find out the status and if additional information has been received. There's also an aspect that assists those that have a closed complaint, or they ask that I review the process. And I also inform them about the complaint review unit, and I assist them with filing for the complaint review unit if that's how they wish to proceed. So I also assist those who want to express concerns or make a suggestion that they wish to bring to the attention of the State Bar for either improving the discipline or the admission system. So at the very core of this position is I am the ear to the public, and I assist with Office of the Chief Trial Counsel matters and admissions matters. Now, I want to discuss what the Public Trust Liaison cannot do. I do not draft complaints for the public, and I cannot act as a legal representative in any matter. I don't intervene in any pending disciplinary matter. I don't have the power to overturn or reverse or modify a finding. And the Public Trust Liaison does not overturn, reverse, or modify a finding and decision of any discipline, complaint, or admissions matter. And the Public Trust Liaison does not make binding decisions or mandate policies.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
On the previous slide? And really very excited to have you on board.
Thank you.
And thanks for this presentation. When you talk about, I think it's the third check mark. For those folks, if you're doing this assessment to make sure proper procedures have been followed, if they have not, then what happens?
Yes, that's when I make a recommendation for the final report. I also have the power to notify the supervising attorney in the matter.
And remind me, what is this final report?
It's going to go to the Board of Trustees with findings and recommendations for improvements.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to present an update on the Public Trust Liaison Office until now. I was elected for the position in mid-September. There was some behind-the-scenes work with collaborating with other offices, but one of the things that is a highlight is that we conducted a soft opening, which allowed partnering offices to make recommendations for the Public Trust Liaison, and I also used that experience to design the office as it is now. During the soft opening, I handled over 60 matters, and I also merged the Office of the Public Trust Liaison with the contact center. The contact center is what I consider the front lines where the public reaches the State Bar. That is the first person they speak to. So it was always my idea to allow the agents on the phone to escalate matters to the Public Trust Liaison if needed. I wanted to share an email that was submitted to me after I assisted somebody. This is for context. This is a person that went through the entire complaint process, and the respondent, who is the attorney, actually was disbarred. By the time that the person reached out to me, she needed assistance in filing the client security fund because she was a candidate for consideration for the client security fund. And after working with her on 2 sessions, she was able to submit her application. And at the beginning of the year, she sent this email to me. And one of the things that is relevant, and it's something that happens that I keep hearing, is that people are going through a hard time when they come to me. And a lot of times that can be alleviated with a little bit of education about the process. This person was really clear that the fact that I was able to assist her in applying for the client security fund, and that the fact that she can be considered, was already a lot more than she expected from us. So this is one of the emails that I use to fill my cup in the mornings. Next.
Enrique, before you move on,
Yes.
is I'm not sure if in here you give some stats. So before the official grand opening of this office, which was a week ago today, January
Yes.
12th, as Enrique said, there was a soft launch, and he was taking folks, many of them who come to me. I was, and previously I had tried to follow up with people to the best I could. I had forwarded many to Enrique, but I just want to share with the Audit Committee, because when Enrique talks about the relationship with the board, that really will be executed through the Audit Committee, where Enrique has a dotted line relationship. But just some comments I received. The public should be appreciative that Ms. Wilson takes all complaints seriously in a professional manner and has a staff she can rely on. Thank you, Mr. Zuniga, for how promptly you contacted me and attempted to resolve my issue. Another one that I got says, public trust liaison Enrique Zuniga contacted me. It was a breath of fresh air to hear a bar representative sound like a real ombudsman. What a difference in attitude makes. Thank you for hiring him. So this is just a snippet. It's been really wonderful. You all know that very often we hear the criticisms, the complaints about our staff. And with Enrique, it's just been a number of these, even during that soft opening period.
Thank you. And I will add that as we stand, we don't have a method to capture the satisfaction of the public trust liaison inquiries. These were unprompted emails, so to me they mean so much more. But in the future, that I'll get to that in the next slide. As Leah said, the launch occurred January 9, 2023, and I already had 60 matters under my belt, so I was able to identify a few gaps in our procedures already. And I also wanted to share that with everybody. As we stand, there is no particular form to file a complaint against an applicant that's seeking positive moral character determination. The way that came about is a member of the public reached out to me and said, I want to file a complaint against a prospective attorney, but the form is designed for the attorney complaints. So that's already a gap that was identified. And also, I've also been reached out by disbarred attorneys, and I've identified that there's little to no knowledge about the reinstatement procedures after disbarment. Some of the positive receptions from the launch, I'd like to share as well. People were very appreciative of the position on LinkedIn. People said that this was an innovative and welcome change. There's a lot of excitement behind the office, and a lot of congratulations after the announcement was made. Next slide. So now I want to share my vision for the next 12 months. My main goal is to increase the visibility of the Public Trust Liaison Office. I know that there is a need for the public to know that we exist in order for me to be an appropriate resource. I want to continue to develop outreach in Spanish. I am working on that. I am a native speaker. I am also an Angelino. So I want to use my native tongue to help out the public as well. As I was saying, I really want to develop a satisfaction survey in multiple languages to capture things that are positive, but also opportunities for growth. And that leads to the next point that I want to make. I want to use the experience to finalize internal procedures of handling OCTC matters and admissions matters. With that being said, I think it's important that this office remains nimble and to maintain the ability to adapt, because the needs of the public change throughout the year. For example, right now the needs of admissions focuses around the bar exam because that's coming up in February, but that might be a different need in the middle of summer. And the final vision for the next 12 months is to prepare for the expansion to other areas of the state bar. So that concludes my slides, and I want to open it up now for questions.
I want to thank you for your presentation, and you've certainly hit the ground running. One of the things that you and I talked about in preparation for this meeting, we really spent time on the 60 different cases that transpired. And so I think it would be great to give the Audit Committee just a flavor of what those 60, of what some of the resolution of those 60 items are, if you could put it in buckets for us. And the other thing that I would point out, and love to see the vision, and you know, it's always great to get good feedback, right? And positive feedback is certainly warranted, and you are celebrated for that. You know, one of the things that I was thinking about post our conversation was, how does your work get translated to the legislature? Because this is a position that emerged from conversations with the legislature, and as they're always kind of have their eye on us, I think it's important to share with them the volume and the scope of how different items that come to the public trust liaison get addressed. And so that was one of the pieces that I definitely wanted to, you know, and I know you've done so much in such a short time frame, but the tenor of those 60 complaints, kind of what sort of high-level buckets they fall in, and then how you envision or how you see this being communicated to legislative staff and the legislators and our stakeholders. I think our stakeholders are in general, right?
Thank you. That's something I'm going to work on. Thank you for bringing it up.
Did you want to respond to Melanie about giving a little bit of flavor for the
Yes.
60?
The majority of the 60 complaints are, I'm sorry, the 60 inquiries that I received focus on the Office of the Chief General Counsel, and in particular about about ongoing complaint process. A lot of times when a complaint is resolved in a manner that the public is not satisfied with, their first instinct is to reach out and to the executive director and complain. A lot of times they're not aware that we have the complaint review unit that will offer them another set of eyes to review the exact same complaint. So a lot of the cases that are people dissatisfied with the outcome of their complaint have been resolved by informing them about the complaint review unit and letting them know that there is another avenue for review. We've also fielded some admissions issues that mostly focus on deadlines and that focus on how long things are taking. But the one that really stuck out to me was the one I shared with everybody, because that actually caused me to take a step back and realize that there might be a need for this in the future. It's not very common, but that's probably why there isn't a process. But it's certainly something that we should look into. And just to clarify, that was, somebody wanted to provide somewhat of a complaint against a person that was trying to be an attorney who is currently going through their moral character and fitness determination. So she wanted the state bar to know that this person is doing X, Y, Z, take that into consideration before he gets licensed.
Great.
Did you forward that information on?
Yes, yes, I did. That was part of the resolution, was to contact the admissions and get in contact with moral character and fitness.
Any other comments for Mr. Zuniga? again, welcome. And I know that you, on behalf of the Audit Committee, as the chair, we are excited to have you in this role. I know that this is the first of many opportunities for you to address this group, and so we look forward to supporting and collaborating with you. And then I'll also say, as a legislative liaison, I look forward to, in that body, utilizing the information as it relates to resolution and sharing that with our legislative partners and our other stakeholders, because I think the work that you do is really important, and the very public-facing role that you have. So thank you for joining us, and looking forward to developing a strong relationship moving forward.
Thank you for having me. I look forward to working with everybody. Thank you.
And I think with that, that takes us through all of our items. There is no closed session item, and I don't believe we need to adjourn, so I want to thank everybody for their participation. And we were only 9 minutes into Finance Committee.